I'd love to read your copy myself.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Hey, Rick, how you doing?
Excellent, excellent.
Awesome, awesome.
Great to see everybody. I miss.
Great to see. It's been a while, Rick. It's been a while, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, because I'm down in San Antonio now.
How did I not know that? I missed that memo, man.
I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
We moved down here last May. We just got so sick and tired of the snow and the weather, and just we love it down here.
Well, that's awesome.
But that makes attending the in-person meetings a little
challenging. Yeah,
a little challenging. Yeah. So I'm glad this is a virtual event. I love it.
Yeah, when a couple of people reached out and asked about this topic, and I thought, let's go virtual, allow more people to join rather than trying to do it over our normal lunch. We'll just we'll use the technology and see how many folks we can get. Hi, Rajinder. Good to see you. Chad, great to see you.
Hello. Thanks for putting this on. As soon as I saw this, I'm like, I'm right there before I could finish my own sentence.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I owe it to Jose Martinez. I hope he's able to join because this was actually his idea to get everybody together. So,
yeah, we've certainly seen an uptick in threats. Take a look at your firewall logs.
Yeah, sometimes it's funny how world events like that can have these ripple effects throughout everything else.
Hey,
Aaron,
Jeff.
I thought we'd give people a few more minutes to join. We're just now, I got 11:29, so we'll give people a few minutes before we kick things off. So
Sounds great to me.
Hey, Jeff. Chad Haxton here from Dallas.
yeah, Chad, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Staying in touch here with what's going on. Very relevant in my world as well down here.
Like Rick in San Antonio, the virtual event allows you the opportunity to join. So glad you were able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Can you guys send some of that warm weather our way? We're ready.
One thing that's nice about Texas, the sun shines a lot more. It's a lot warmer, a lot sooner. So
Yeah.
We had a bit of a tease this weekend, and then the rain came and the temps dropped. So yeah, I'm definitely ready now after the weekend.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And welcome to Mark Davies. Mark is from the Children's Museum. He's sitting in for Kathy today. So Mark, glad you could join us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And Brett, is that Brett Hayes or a different Brett?
Yeah, it's Brett Hayes. I'm driving, so I'm muted.
Nope, cool. Glad you could join, Brett. And Buck, good to see you from West Virginia.
Good to be here.
We kind of got a national audience going today. It's pretty cool.
NDCIO network is really expanding.
Yeah, we're going to change the name. Matt, good to see you, man.
Likewise, Jeff. Great to see you.
We'll give people a couple more minutes to join, and then I will turn it over to Aaron.
while we're waiting, Jeff, would it be fair to ask the group if it, I just saw that Trendy Minds recommendation that was submitted by somebody in the group. Has anybody else worked with them? No? Okay.
I have worked with them in the past. Yes. I'm the one that asked the question.
Oh, okay.
They seem to be great at the creative part. Where we need some help is the website hosting, monitoring, support. I want to get out of that business, and they don't do that. So
I'm with you. I'm looking to get out of it. We just want to refresh. We don't need to rewrite everything. Sounds like you've got a site that you just kind of want to pour it over to be hosted and supported, right? We're a little bit more maintenance than that up front, but I want to do the same thing. So
yeah, they're actually looking. We are doing a website refresh as well, but
really,
yeah, but really at the end of the day, you need someone that's going to be there to monitor it. So
right. I'm going to follow that thread closely. I'm glad you asked.
the one that wasn't, Colin responded, Sanpay. Hang on just a second. I think he only responded to me. Bear with me. I'm terrible at Gmail. Sandpaper Studios, a local company that does craft CMS.
Okay.
This is Brett Hayes. I'm the one that responded to that. And I know Trendy Minds is doing it for at least one of my clients, and I think another one as well. So that's interesting that you're getting a response of, no, we don't do that. So maybe they're trying to get out of that.
Sounds like in some cases with their larger clients, they have a third party that they put in the middle.
Maybe it's just you, Chad.
The call I had this morning, I felt like it was me.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I am sure we will have some other folks join. I appreciate everybody jumping on. Feel free to stay on as long as you'd like. We are recording this, so we will load it to our YouTube channel probably tomorrow by the time it processes and gets loaded up there. But I want to thank Aaron and his team at RevealRisk for agreeing to jump on today and talk about this topic. Several of you reached out and asked if we could have a conversation, and I thought RevealRisk would be a great organization to facilitate our dialogue today as we talk about this. So with that, Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you and have you introduce your team and get rocking and rolling.
Yeah, sounds good, Jeff. Can everyone hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. So with me today, we have Tim Sewell, who just got back on a red eye from Hawaii. So he's going to be more for Q&A. He's a longtime 20-year cyber architect across the defense industry, chief security architect at the Mayo Clinic, and we met at Lilly before we co-founded RevealRisk in 2018. And then Aaron West, who will talk on the back end of this topic as incident response planning and practice is a relevant thing that we can all do and get better at. So Aaron has a long military career, 21 years with the Army, and pivoted to cyber about 7 years ago. So you'll hear a little bit more from him, but I am Aaron Pritz and have been part of the CIO network. I think when I left Lilly in 2017, Jeff and I connected somehow or through, actually, I believe it was through Aaron West, and got involved. And as we've built our practice, we've stayed in touch. As Jeff, I think, mentioned in the preview, he and I bumped into each other at a company that we were both supporting, and kind of had the same impact. A lot of CIOs coming to us and kind of saying, okay, I'm getting top-down interest and intrigue, kind of sarcastically, more than maybe some of the other world events like COVID. Russia, Ukraine is serious, but obviously we've been through a lot of serious things in the last couple of years. But anyway, no time like the present to make sure that we're all doing what we need to be doing, and understand the reality of the situation and some of the hype of the situation. Obviously, in any, as Tim and I were talking this morning, in any shooting war, propaganda is going to be at play. So sometimes it's, are things that are happening real? Are they not real? Are they for propaganda? Are they going to impact us? Probably lots of questions that go through the head. And so by the way, RevealRisk, we employ no sales reps. Most of us, all of our leadership team are practitioners. We've grown to about 10 people focused here in, based in Indianapolis, but we support a lot of companies nationally, including a lot of large companies, as Tim and I spent most of our career on the large side. So don't want to spend really too much time talking about us. Want to dive into the discussion here and really make it interactive. So we've got some prepared material, but I really want to make this a discussion and get some good thought leadership rolling across the group, as this group always does. So, well, already did background, already talked a little bit about RevealRisk. Think of us as program builders, process improvement experts, and we do a small amount of managed services, but we're not a reseller. So we do like third-party risk management as a service. We build cyber programs, vCISO. We're on the build side. So for today's agenda, kind of what we put in the briefing, and we added incident response to the end after Jeff sent out the overview, but wanted to give our view on kind of a high-level threat landscape. Really distill that down to, what are the things we should all really be concerned about, and then, in no case in cybersecurity is fear, uncertainty, and doubt helpful. It can get some people's attention, but I always like to pivot to, okay, what does that mean from a risk management standpoint, and what mitigations can we be taking both short-term and long-term, not only in this, but just in general. And then the other topic, through a couple conversations with CIOs with the attention from the senior leadership, is how can either we as CIOs or CISOs better empower our executives to help us. And then in bigger organizations where there's a CISO and a CIO, we've been in a number of companies where that relationship is not as solid as it could be. So I'm gonna give you a white paper. Actually, I wrote it 2 years ago, and I'm always tweaking it, but seeing a lot of different dynamics at the leadership level, and kind of executives not always helping each other, more getting in each other's way, put together some thought leadership on some best practices to help that relationship and help it really be positive, whether it's CISO to CIO or CIO and CISO to their CEO, CFO, whatever that dynamic is. And then lastly, incident response planning and practice, because that is, as you'll hear, that is the one thing that we can all guarantee that we can do and have ready, whereas some of the cyber, detective controls and preventative controls may not always work. The threat actor is always a step ahead of us, so we'll spend a little bit of time there. But my monitor just went dark. 1 second. Are you guys seeing anything, or are you seeing a black screen? All right, I can still see. Okay,
We're still
monitor.
seeing it.
All right, great, thank you. All right, so other than the levity of my monitor blipping out for a second, I always like to start with some humor. And the humor created itself when I got a text message, I believe it was Friday. For those of you, there's phishing, there's vishing, there's smishing. Actually, I got this slide wrong. SMS texting was the one that is here. And this one's likely not from Russia, but I thought it was humorous enough to give us a little bit of an icebreaker. So this is a classic scam, send out spray attack to text message, financial oriented. They're looking to get somebody to, $450 a week. Gosh, yeah, I could use $450 a week. Oh, I only need to, stick a 3M decal on my car, and then just rake it in. And I'm looking through the information. They're not asking for bank accounts. Sounds great. So, I share, as I always do, I share that with the team just because we educate a lot of different firms on that. And then I probably got a little bad, and I decided to go ahead and mess with the attacker, which I don't advise, and it may blow back to haunt me here. But so yeah, I filled out his request. Harry Dunn, if you don't remember from the classic movie, is one of the actors or one of the characters from Dumb and Dumber. I put the Doodleberg 30, which I did have to Google that. I did not know the make and model of the little moped that they made their way to Aspen. And I thought that would be the end of it. You know, I wasn't sure that there'd be a room for the branding sticker. So I even offered to, you know, go bare chested and get a tattoo of the Cadbury. So then, you know, yesterday rolls around and the attack gets handed off to the next person in the chain of the little scam. And they're interacting with me now as Harry Dunn and confirming, by the way, this address is for the Providence Police Department, which is where Harry and Lloyd left to make their journey to Aspen. So confirmed that, they're writing me a check. Police should get it in a couple days. And then how the scam works is I basically receive the check, it's fake and it takes a week to bounce. I send a small amount from my bank account or whatever amount they asked for, $450 here, to the fake graphic design company. And then they basically, the check bounces, I'm accountable to pay my bank back for $29.50 and the $450 is out the door. So this is a classic scam listed on the FBI website, you know, origin, you know, specifically the RAP campaign started in 2016. But this stuff happens and it works. So I just thought it was humorous and entertaining for myself to go through this, but the easy stuff works, which is why for all types of attacks, users are a critical kind of common thread of where attackers like to start. It's easier to trick a human than it is to crack through your firewall that you've been tuning, hopefully for various things. So enough on that. Hopefully that was at a minimum entertaining, but also hopefully eye-opening to maybe what your users might be seeing. That's more of a personal attack, but the others can be just as bad or sometimes more advanced. All right, so now let's, as on topic, let's talk about the Russia-Ukraine thing. Everyone here probably knows the risks from Russia are not new for cyber. They've always kind of been a powerhouse from a threat actor standpoint. And also they're not, you know, the tension between Ukraine is not new. We'll talk about that in a bit, but you guys probably remember in 2017, the NotPetya attack that I was at Lilly at the time that affected Merck Pharmaceuticals, one of, you know, a peer company, very significantly. That was spillover from Russian or Ukrainian accounting software, whether it was intended to sprawl out or not. Merck was running that software. It snaked through their network in a matter of seconds and took several of their manufacturing sites down. So again, nothing's new. So what's changed? And kind of what brought Jeff and I together on this topic, you know, CEO of at least 3 companies that we've heard from, wanting some meetings to talk through kind of, you know, should cyber elevate in urgency and what does it mean to us, and especially for international companies, you know, what are our geographical impacts? So obviously we know about the physical escalation that's happening with the ground war, threats of digital. Tim and I were actually having a good coffee conversation this morning. The threats, you know, at this point have been more physical. We've heard of a few things that have happened with Ukraine about things getting knocked out, but nothing as far as widespread outages. And Tim and I were kind of postulating on reasons for that. And there's actually several really good articles out there. One that we were looking at was from the Washington Post. Everything from keeping Ukraine operational versus completely breaking them down to make them viable, you know, as the ground war continues, to not wanting to create tension with the West. There's a lot of theories as far as why we haven't seen the big boom yet. But just kind of what we've seen in the last, I guess it's been 13, 14 days and kind of building before that. You know, the Biden administration kind of maybe intentionally publicly, you know, discussed that it's looking at a menu of massive cyber attacks that could be used in this situation. You guys may have heard Anonymous declared war on Russia. Anonymous is kind of an informal association of hackers that usually do things for causes, sometimes good, sometimes bad. And then on the flip side, the Conti ransomware gang, which has been heavily active and just behind a lot of the attacks that have hit the US, basically threatened to retaliate and fully support Russia if the West attacks. So we've kind of got this escalating tit for tat impact. And then whilst US and other countries are starting to ban imports, create sanctions, everyone probably saw the many companies pulling out of Russia pretty specifically, which will cause financial instability. So that just kind of a recap. Obviously, you guys all probably read the news. We've gone pretty deep in staying in tune with the news as well as the cyber news, just for the business that we're in. But that and more that's kind of what's led up. So I attended a SANS webinar. SANS is a pretty good organization on the 25th. And actually this couple key points that I thought were worthy of kind of recapping. Already mentioned Russia's power for cyber actor. They have a lot of resources, both commercial and a long time ledge to have connections between the government and the private organizations that are doing more cyber crime type business. And then they just have a lot of different attack types, the NotPetya thing that I mentioned with the 2017 Ukraine thing. And really their call to action was more sharing like this across the community. Even if there's competitors on this call or any other call, what I found in cyber is the more open the even competing organizations can be on what they're doing and how they're doing it, we can better defend against the same adversary or bad guy that we have faced. All right, so let me pause there before we I didn't want to spend too much time on the wind up and the what's going on in the world, but let me pause there to open it up to the group on any questions on anything anybody else has heard or concerns that your senior leadership has risen to you to go research.
Aaron, this is Christoph Egel. Just a quick question. You mentioned Ukraine, you mentioned Russia. Any other countries that we should keep our eyes on? I'm thinking about Belarus as an example. They are locked on their shoulders, or maybe even more intense with Russia. Any other countries that are on your radar screen?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the big countries that maybe aren't specific to this specific isolated event. I think anything around the old Russian bloc, depending on where the events pivot, there could be ancillary impact. Tim, do you have any thoughts on that specifically? Defense industry.
Yeah, so a couple other countries that I'm keeping kind of just a light watch on. Poland is one where we might see some additional activity given their recent very public support of Ukraine, including donation of MiG military airplanes to US for Ukrainian use, which is kind of an interesting pipeline in and of itself. Anything in Western Europe, anything with any of the NATO allies in that geography, you may see some activity there. The other thing that is kind of pinging on my radar right now, Japan made some interesting comments last week about potentially some islands that are currently Russian that Japan feels like maybe should belong to Japan. So we may see some other activities emerging in other theaters, Japan being one. China-Taiwan tensions are also increasing, though not getting nearly as much press given what's happening in the Ukraine. And then actually there's some interesting activity in South America that specifically around Bolivia and Colombia. So those are some other geographies that are starting to see increased activity, at least the channels that I'm watching.
Great. Any other questions before we kind of start to pivot to actions? All right. Okay, so kind of looking across what could happen to to many of the companies on this call, I believe are in the U.S. There may be some that are, I know there are some that have international operations. Tried to go through and stratify what the types of things that could happen to all of us are. So the first one, and it's probably most close to mind because of the last large scale event with NotPetya, is spillover. So actually, Tim and I, again, having a coffee discussion, whether it was intentional or spillover on NotPetya, because and Tim is probably the expert on that one because of his past in the defense industry. But spillover attacks are basically where, you know, something might be targeted at Ukraine or at Russia, and it you know, infected software, like for example the Ukrainian accounting software that got impacted with NotPetya, and other companies had that software, and then it sprawled out from there. That is kind of just a general bucket for, hey, it may not be something targeted to a US based company, but it might spill over or be collateral damage, if you will. Disruptive attacks, I mean, ransomware has continued to grow significantly in general, just from a profit, you know, a bad actor profit center level. And I think sometimes ransomware can be disguised as ransomware. Again, back to the NotPetya, that was really more of like a wiper destructive malware that destroyed boot sectors of drives versus you know, encrypting data, and you know, most of it was not recoverable. It was Maersk, the shipping company, had to rebuild assets from scratch. State-funded cyber criminal games, you know, Conti's an example there. Pro-Russian hacktivists. Again, those groups are going to be more focused on disruption, website defacing, you know, making noise in media, things like that. And then obviously, you know, specifically the Russian government threat actors. And I know it's a bit of a blur, you know, as has been discussed a lot in the media around state-funded criminal games versus true Russian actors that are, you know, military operatives and things like that. I did pull out of CISA, which is, I'll have a few sources for you guys for some free threat intelligence, but from a Russia risk threat vector standpoint, the areas, not surprisingly, a lot of critical infrastructure, but healthcare, energies, utility, and they specifically called out telco, financial networks, and then transportation, with some examples in aviation, were the areas of most concern for, you know, government-specific targeted organizations. So any questions there, or Tim, anything to add from your perspective?
Just one thing I would add, beyond the immediate impact of a disruptive or destructive attack like ransomware, there is increased activity in obtaining access and maintaining persistence in networks. So even though they may not be doing something immediately active, they're still working very, very hard and very, very broadly to gain access to networks, to environments, to critical suppliers that are in multiple supply chains, just to be able to have access for something that they may want to do at some point in the future. So there's still a lot of covert activity that is happening in terms of gaining and maintaining access, in addition to the increases we're seeing in overt acts like ransomware or specifically destructive malware.
Comment. Any other questions or things you don't see on the list that you would have expected to? Okay. All right, and then one, I mentioned it, but I thought there was some good information again from the SANS webinar from last week. Wiper was something that came out, version in 2015 was called Kill Disk. There was one that came out last week, maybe 2 weeks ago now, as I was putting this together, called Hermantic Wiper. This first appeared in December of last year. But the thing about this is it's similar to the NotPetya thing, where the intent is to appear as a digitally signed certification or certificate coming from a company called Hermetica, which is where it got its name. Keenly able to dodge the antivirus tools. I think they've caught up now, but basically this was causing some significant damage to equipment. And there were some provided recommendations from SANS, which I pasted here, and Jeff will make these slides and some of the the white paper I mentioned earlier available to the group. But just some things that you can do specific to that to avoid that one. And that is, like mentioned here, to be in the realm of collateral damage. So companies that have gotten that outside of Ukraine, not necessarily targeted, but the spillover, a good real example of where the spillover has and can and will continue to happen. All right, now we're getting into mitigation. So what we did here is we tried to say, okay, let's look through all of the, NIST CSF, NIST Cybersecurity framework, very widely accepted framework. If you're not using NIST, you're using ISO to form your program, and try to think through, okay, there's at least for NIST CSF, there's over, I think, 109 things or control areas, subdomains that you can focus on. Obviously, you can't fix everything overnight. So, if you get that question from the CEO or one of your executive leaders on what you can or should be doing, what are some of those things? So this is our thoughts, and I would welcome some good feedback and continue this discussion. Let's make this an iterative list so we can make sure we gather the thought leadership from the group. So number one, and again, a lot of our clients, we start with, or very early on, we do put an information security incident response plan in place and practice it. I learned this the hard way at the last large company I was with, in going through one of the incidents where they didn't have a plan and observing the chaos. And I've heard some leaders say, hey, we'll come up with a plan, but we need to get the basics in place. And you'll hear more from Aaron West later, but the attack could happen tonight. So I think it's really important to know, even if you don't have a great defense and response system, to know what you do, because that can make the difference between a good response and containing that incident, or not doing it as quickly as you can and the damage sprawling. Secondly, I think, again, back to the humorous example from the beginning, a lot of these attacks, over 91%, continue to start with the human element. Many of us run, solutions like KnowBe4, or Proofpoint has solutions, InfoSec Institute, that give some commodity cybersecurity training, and you can run automated, ethical phishing campaigns, and that helps. But in many cases, it's not enough. So I think what we've been doing with some of the clients that we're VC-sewing for is some targeted communication that are specific to the industry and company that they're in, some campaigns that make it real for the sector and bring the hearts and minds to the table, versus just kind of the annoying once a month, hey, here's something I either failed or passed and didn't realize that I had that training. The third one that we put up there is vulnerability risk management and patching. And on one of the next slides, I took from CISA the known Russian targeted exploits. So most of these you probably have been on your radar, or hopefully have been on your radar, but a good check for the group to make sure that you've at least done the ones that are known to be actively being exploited. But the other thing, just reality, is vulnerability risk management and patching programs take a while, right? So if you don't have something in place, it's not something that you can do overnight. So we like to focus on where are our biggest risks, what are the assets that matter most, get those in order first, and scale from there. I think the other thing that is another hard one is knowing where your crown jewels are, and so you can actually do that risk-based prioritization. And asset management, despite being the #1 control on the CSC, formerly SANS top 20 controls, it's usually the one that, when I talk to CIOs, most of them say, yeah, we're not as good as we need to be there. So as security practitioners, you can only control, or you can only protect what you know about. So as CIOs, making sure we know what our boundaries are, we know what our assets are. Again, not something that you fix overnight. So as I think about, on these so far, the immediate things that from a Russia standpoint would be practice your incident response plan, or build one if you don't have one. Be talking more to your workforce and things that resonate with them about what they should be looking out for. And then focusing your vulnerability and patching on the things that are most known to be exploited. And of course, scale from there. A couple more to add to the list. I think I've got 6 total. Is third-party risk management has been a huge increase in focus for where we've been spending our time, because a growing number of the attacks have started with third parties, whether it be MSP support, IT support organizations, attacks coming from law firms. We've seen many more that in the last 2 years. Those have been pretty prominently displayed. So what can you do to to control your third-party risk, to do the legal due diligence as well as verify controls, so you are covered if you get something from upstream or downstream that affects your organization. And then lastly, again, one that's doesn't happen overnight either, the monitoring, detection, and response. Really short-term thinking about, even using some of the free threat intelligence resources that I'll share in a bit to help you figure out where you could be focusing. And then linked to the incident response planning and practice, we always recommend having a incident response retainer. So you don't, once you have pre-negotiated prices, but you've got somebody that's on the hook to come in if you have an incident that can deal with that. So let me pause there. That is, I guess, our opinion of the things that we can most focus on in relation to what we're dealing with now. I'm curious, just to kind of open it up to the group, what other things are you hearing that you should be doing, or what other things do you not see on the list that the group could value in discussing?
So Aaron, this is Chad Haxton. I'm in Dallas, but formerly from Indy.
Cool.
And this is right up the alley of what we're doing in our world. I'm a $3.5 billion public company. Last summer, CFO on our board audit committee reached out wanting to know more about, hey, we need to be ready for our cyber, what's going on. So we're in the middle of all of this right now. So we did a full NIST assessment, compared it to capability maturity model 1 to 5. Came out to be a very poor score, of course. So, and while we have done some of these things in bits and pieces, we've got a whole comprehensive plan now that we're doing all these things, reporting out to the audit committee every quarter, got a list of action items. So we've done an IR plan, got a retainer. We're focusing on asset management right now. We're doing we've done some EDR, but we're doing some additional stuff, looking at some additional services for advanced detection and response with some MSSP tools and groups, leveraging, so it starts with asset management, to your point, vulnerability, patching, then the overall, what I call the stuff on top of all that's kind of Google on for the cyber world, to take all these things, bring it together, do AI and ML and help you identify things pretty quickly, because you can't look at all the logs yourself with your team manually. So
yeah,
it's right up our alley what we're doing in the throes of it. So
good validation. Others, and also want to hear from some of the smaller companies, because I know Rome wasn't built in a day, and even coming from Eli Lilly, that we had an incident back in 2012 that was public, and it was a journey over years to get as you mentioned, Chad, the 1 to 5 CMMI maturity rating, to get past 3. Tim and I always used to always say you need to get to scale across a lot of the services to really get to that maturing and iteratively continuously learning. So yeah, for the smaller organizations, picking the bets and knowing that you're not going to get to a 5 or may never get to a 5, especially with firms that have limited resources. Awesome. What other comments or items is everyone doing out there to kind of be more ready, or to continue the journey that you've already set out?
Aaron,
this is Rick Rush. I'm actually in San Antonio. Used to be in Indy, and my company has partnered with a firm for over a year that specifically works with MSPs to try and make sure they're more secure, so that hopefully they can make their clients more secure. And I've learned more in that year about securing, preventing lateral movement, that I learned in the past 5 or 6 years in cybersecurity. So that's the company's goal, they're called Galactic Advisors, and their goal is to protect 1 million people. So, yeah, it's an audacious goal, but really it's a smart team, and they're trying to do some internal penetration tests to try to really show where these gaps are. And like, the stuff getting past AV, that's kind of old hat, that's been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, good comments, Rick. And yeah, we've got a number of MSP partners that we kind of do VCSO in parallel, and like you said, do pen tests. I believe in, I'm a second role at Lilly was an audit role, and learned a lot about segregation of duties. And there's some MSPs that do some awesome, security related add-ins. But I think having an independent advisor / cyber expert can really help it, to your point, strengthen what the MSP is doing for you, as well as bring that independence. So good comments, Rick. Any other kind of key things that companies are doing that you want to share with the group, or questions of things, hey, should I be doing this? Is this worth my time right now with what we're dealing with? Any kind of trade-off type of questions that you have for Tim or Aaron or I?
I was going to mention cyber insurance. We just went through renewal last year, and it was much different than prior years. So what are you seeing there?
Yeah, and I'll comment, and I'm sure that Tim and actually the other Aaron's done some work with research or with cyber insurance as well. So a couple comments to start it is, yeah, the premiums have, I think last I heard is 4x what they were a year ago. I think the what used to be a 1 or 2 page checkbox has now turned into vetting of controls. There's one nonprofit, a large nonprofit that we support, that had signed a couple of years ago cyber insurance policy that they had check boxes to things that they didn't necessarily have or didn't understand what they were checking, and now they actually had an incident over $1 million of financial impact. Their insurance is suspended, and they can't get it until they put they can't regain it. So I think the bar is going up. I think there'll be a lot of volatility with cyber insurance, as many people came to the party to try to play, and then I think the risks went skyrocketed. A lot of claims were getting paid out. You guys, back to the Merck NotPetya, they finally settled the lawsuit about using the war exclusion as a reason to not pay the insurance for Merck and Maersk and all the others. And that one went to the company, but I feel like that'll be ping pong for a while. I think the Russia, now this is more a legit war. So might that clause come into play if, spillover collateral damage continues to impact there. Aaron, Tim, I know you guys have had some clients with cyber insurance journeys as well. Any other comments to add there?
Yeah, I think you hit most of it, Aaron. The quick summary would be that premiums are going up, coverage is going down, the vetting process is getting much more invasive and thorough. So what was kind of an almost a get out of jail free card, right? You could go back to your board and say, well, we've got cyber insurance in case anything bad happens, is becoming a real effort and exercise. And I will say what I'm seeing in some organizations is that that's driving real positive change in their cyber posture. It's encouraging investment. It's helping to provide that financial incentive back to leadership to say, well, this is a reason among many others that we ought to be investing in our cyber program, because we can't get the insurance anymore if we don't have some of these basic controls like asset inventory and endpoint detection and response, third-party risk management program, and so on. So it is starting to drive some positive change, but in the near term, it's been mostly disruptive, again, because the process is harder, the costs have gone up, and the coverage has gone down.
I think to your point, if I could add just the whole visibility it's brought to our organization, because we're talking at a board level, we're talking at a CEO level, and they're all about like, well, what is the they realize that there's investment that's needed. I think you do a NIST assessment. We leverage internal audit who reports to the board. And so they did this internal risk assessment using NIST with an outside group called Protivity, which many probably know of. And, when you get a chart that says you're a 1 versus a 3, and, that gets everybody's attention pretty fast. And how do you manage the whole idea of, hey, we're not falling apart here, but you might have a firewall, you might have Proofpoint, which we use as our email stuff, a couple other tools. But if you're not doing these kind of things you got on this page here, you're really not doing a full cyber, security program. And I think that came to light here, and it's, like I said, at the highest levels, and it changes the willingness for investment and resources, and even outside of what you might have budgeted for and planned for.
I'll add that with the higher cost of the insurance and the lower benefits coming out, one of the things that did come out of our recent negotiation with the insurance group was they're providing us now with some services. For example, where they're providing us with a tabletop exercise in about 90 days. We're going to go through that, which kind of helps, with Aaron's number 1 point here with the practice it. We're going to go through that exercise, which we'll probably do horrible, but we'll learn from it and, be able to make corrections and grow from it.
That is key. And I won't steal Aaron West's thunder on incident response plan, but you're going to start not, it's like playing a video game for the first time. Not going to be your best version, but practice makes better, even if there's no perfect. So totally agree. All right. So a few things, and obviously this is just a bunch of links, but the sources that I've seen, at least the free ones, you can pay for threat intel feeds and feed your SOC and all that. But some good ones, SANS, this Russia video, I took a few things from that. It's an hour and a half. It gets really technical. So I've skimmed a lot of it for you, but it is a really interesting, they've got some pretty good thought leaders on that. I thought it was worth a share out. CISA alerts, they've got a ton of subsites within this. And obviously these alerts that I mentioned earlier on the known vulnerabilities that are exploited by Russian APTs. A lot of the stuff you've probably haunts your nightmares from big patching exercises. Pulse Secure, I remember that one. Fortinet, when that one came out. The Microsoft Exchange one was a big deal for a lot of companies. So a lot of these are things you've probably addressed, but it would be worth a look on this and kind of keeping resources like this close as new things come out. The MITRE attack framework, always good, kind of linked up to the CIS control list to it's another tool to help you focus and align to where the bad actors can be focused. And then from SANS, there's an Internet Storm Center. That's their kind of threat intel site. Again, you could spend hours and days on all these. So if you've got somebody on your security team, that could leverage these resources, or you've got a little time to just stay current enough, know enough to be dangerous, maybe worth some effort. All right. So before we move on, any questions of anything we've not covered on kind of what to do about Russia, the threat landscape, what things are most likely to impact companies that we're all responsible for? Anything else before we move on to the kind of senior leadership management topic?
This is Christoph. Not necessarily an additional question, but I heard a common theme from many of you about getting external help. I think this was, everyone talked and mentioned what they are doing. There was an external help component, and understanding the risk, assessing the vulnerabilities requires a degree of objectivity about what we are doing and what we can do that the team may not necessarily have. So, in my prior world, we were very strong advocates about vulnerability assessment, maturity assessment, and getting the objective expert in to help us to identify what we got to do first, what we got to do next. So I would second this greatly.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and I think Tim and I sit on a unique situation because we spent 20-year cyber professionals and IT, what would that, Tim, be? 18 of those on the corporate side in roles that like you guys are and kind of pivoting to do what we do now. We like to say we have the objectivity, but we also know what reality can look like because we've been in your realities before. But definitely agree, in all of our organizations, we, corporate wise, we use external help, and you've got to determine where do you prioritize the outside experts versus your internal team that you want to build up and build that acumen and grow and expand that over time. All right, so kind of how this whole topic came to bear is kind of more intrigue from senior leadership. And when Jeff kind of asked me to do this, I first thought back, one, to kind of do what we've done here is kind of share the threat landscape and talk about things that we're recommending that are most impactful, and hear from you guys on some of the learnings that you've had along the way, which has been awesome. The next thing is, for me, there's a lot of disconnects, especially I saw this on the corporate side, but I've seen it now having a number of various size clients, and disconnects in leadership, whether CEO, CFO, CIO, CISO, somewhere within that chain. It's not always the same reporting chain. There's some sort of disconnect, frustration, misalignment, and tension. So I think it was 2 years ago in 2000, I wrote this white paper. I'm about ready to update a version of it, and it covers a couple things. One, kind of unpacks, and just in a very transparent way, because I've been on both sides of the equation, is what are some of the things that can get in the way of two good, well-intended people moving something forward, whether it's money, finance or budget, or if it's kind of agendas, digital transformation versus security as a cost center. A lot of different root causes. I won't go into all that here, but I'll, the link to the white papers here. You can take a look at it. You can give me feedback on it. You can tell me if I need to, what I need to update, as I continue to learn myself. But then specifically, kind of the call to action was, if I'm called in, like at the board level, or a CEO or the president of a mid-sized business is looking for cyber help and doesn't have maybe has a lower level security leader, I wanted to write something that would be kind of key areas of focus for questions that they could jump in to add value. On the flip side, if you're a CIO or a CISO reporting up to the senior leader that's either engaged or not engaged, I wanted to kind of have a question set that you could proactively lean into to kind of tell your story and help you get what you need. And I think if Chad is still on, you might see some things in the journey that you were talking about that resonate here. So within the white paper, there's a number of sub questions under each of these, but at the top level, these are the things that actually I built this list on things that I wasn't hearing enough of discussion around when I was on the corporate side, and things that I try to infuse with leaderships to help, with various leaders to help them work better together. So again, imagine for this conversation a CEO and yourself, a CIO or a CISO, kind of a really good conversation around cyber. So topic number one, can we answer the question of what are our most critical risks from a business and operations standpoint? I am still surprised to this day. A lot of the new clients that we walk into, I ask a question like that, and they have like blank stares, or yeah, we know that we have personal information, but we've not really taken the time to understand data sensitivity, or where pockets of the company that would have more heightened risk. So understanding the business risk landscape is going to make a cybersecurity professional's job immensely easier, because you can start with what matters most and then continue to try to boil the ocean. It's never possible to expand out from that, the crown jewels themselves. Secondly, the threat landscape. So the senior leader should be asking, or the CISO, CIO should be portraying, what is in front of us from an industry standpoint. Are we ready and equipped to respond to those types of things? That's where the tabletop and a solid incident response plan and roles and responsibilities, and knowing who's on first and how are you going to to react comes into play. We've already had a couple of good CIO mentions of maturity. So kind of taking temperature on where you're at now. And I think it was mentioned earlier, like, you know, the 1 out of 5 or the 1 out of whatever scoring rubric, kind of seeing where you're very, very low maturity can sometimes help you get more momentum into saying, yeah, we can't afford to be, you know, that low of maturity. We thought we had more. In most cases with senior leaders, I think there's a kind of a lens of assuming everything's okay, but not necessarily having the acumen to ask the right questions to get down into the details, or technical people talking past senior leaders and they just don't get on the same page on how do we get to brass tacks on what we should be investing in. So then similar to what the person mentioned earlier, you know, take your temperature on current state maturity, set your goals for future state, and knowing that not every company, most are not going to get to a 5, a perfect score. Maybe the Department of Defense, probably not even, but companies in financial services, you know, they've been at this for decades. They might be a little bit more mature than other industry sectors that are, you know, earlier into their investment. Measurement, big believer. I did a role at Lilly as a 6 Sigma black belt, and kind of learned the saying, you can't improve what you can't measure. So understanding how we're going to know if we're winning or losing as we go from current state maturity to the future state, and how do we know how to adjust if we're not making the progress that we need to. And then internal and external partnering. This is two different, you know, similar but very different topics. I see a lot of disconnect within, especially large companies, of different agendas between cyber, physical security, IT, legal, compliance, and privacy. You know, you would think that privacy and cyber would be like lockstep partners because you're protecting data, but there's internal conflict. Like, think about privacy, especially in Europe and GDPR, of, you know, not wanting to over monitor data, whereas sometimes cyber, you might want to monitor everything so you can see if something bad is happening. So I've seen a lot of organizations that just get stuck and go round and around with bureaucracy or just misaligned agendas internally. So that's where senior leaders can help to kind of make sure that that is either set up from a governance standpoint or the more cohesion is there. And then externally partnering. So we already talked about, you know, getting help externally from, you know, companies like us, but also, you know, where are you sharing cross company? When I was in pharma at Lilly, you know, one of the best uses of my time externally was the HISAC, and there's that's the Healthcare Information Security Action Center, I believe. And there's one for most industries. Manufacturing has one, financial services has a large one. Getting involved into that is kind of where competitors come together. They drop down their guard and they share everything about cyber that can help everyone. Again, I went to probably 5 or 6 of those, you know, 2 or 3 day summits, and with some of the best learning that I was able to take back and really learn from my peers. And then the senior leader kind of knowing what are the CISO's biggest concerns. Are those clear? Are they reflective in the risk landscape and the goals and maturity? I like to coach executives to make sure that they are getting the support that they need from the executive team, because I think we're far past an era where IT is doing cybersecurity for the company, because the human factor is so much of a target. I don't see any organization where senior leaders shouldn't be involved at a minimum as a stakeholder or a sponsor to kind of help reinforce the need for people to understand what they need to know about this topic and how to avoid being part of an attack or a personal family scam, and changing their behaviors to address that. And then kind of in line with that workforce awareness and engagement, how do executives help to drive that? So anyway, this is the high level one-liner for a lot more content that can kind of help you as a leader to navigate these very important topics. But I've just seen personally, if some of these areas aren't being addressed and you're doing a lot of good technical implementations, like a lot of us that came from IT do, you're probably missing opportunity to help your company progress the risk mitigation. You're leaving stuff on the table. So I know I said a lot there. Let me pause. Any questions about that? And yeah, offer is real. As I republish this, or as you send the link, if you have some thoughts on things from your own learnings or experiences, I would love in the revision to this to be able to help to adjust this, because my goal is to help relationships between CISOs, CIOs, and their executives become stronger and more aligned, so we can all move forward together in more cohesive ways. All right, so now if there's no more questions, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron West, who's going to go a little bit deeper on what we've touched on, which is incident response, preparedness, and readiness, and what you could kind of some things that you can do to kind of up your game in your readiness.
All right. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk with you today. I want to say up front that I do plan to seek penance for so much formal education, and I do hope to receive forgiveness. But talking about higher education, since there are several folks that said they're from Texas, I feel compelled to mention that my daughter is a freshman down at Baylor University, so I've been down there to visit a few times already. So I do work in incident response. DFARS is for you Department of Defense contractors for the CMMC standard. I'm also involved quite a bit in our third-party risk practice as well. I attended a planning course in the military, and it was something that not everyone went to, but the first day we were there, we were reminded that it was going to be a tough course and something we're going to apply a lot of time to. So it was about 5 o'clock getting ready to leave, and we were told not going anywhere until we all read an article we were given called "What If We Fight Tonight," and stayed late to discuss that. So that's always stuck with me, because it continually reminds me that we can't tell ourselves, well, in 6 months we'll be ready, 12 months we'll be ready. You just need to think of it as a marathon, and you need to be preparing a little bit every day, and also realizing that your organization changes, not just people, but situation. And so continuing to have that readiness focus, kind of helps you kind of eat the elephant a little bit at a time, as they say. And then I don't want to forget, I want to add one thing to this Russia-Ukraine discussion, being the military guy here. And I would say that we're definitely not out of the woods on a potential larger attack. And that's probably because the Russians don't want to utilize all their tools up front. But I think actually the danger is if the Russians are not successful and they have to withdraw, you may see that used kind of a burn it all down kind of approach in that situation. So definitely something to watch timeline wise as it relates to us. So let's talk about plan and practice. I just call this the better plan preparedness equation. So your plan combined with that test, and really continual tests over time, based on what's practical for the organization, that is what makes you better prepared. And it is integration of what ifs, not an unlimited number, but what are those prioritized what ifs that your organization needs to address, and then what facts and assumptions are driving your plan. Do you have backups? Do you know you're viable? Have you tested them? How long does it take you to back up? Have you tested that? So definitely anything that you are assuming, if there is some way for you to turn it into a fact, that's what part of this process helps you do. And of course, it's about building the team, the familiarity of the plan, but also how you're going to work together. All right, so our plan's worthless. So Dwight Eisenhower said long ago, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And I don't think the he meant plans are worthless. The D-Day invasion plan was massive. They spent literally years on it. But he was getting at this point of it's really the act of planning, which is an active word, not just plan, the noun, that's the most important aspect of this whole idea. And we were talking in the office about this quote, and someone mentioned, hey, how about the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I looked at this, and he said this in response to a reporter telling him, hey, your opponent has a plan to beat you. And that's when he responded with, everyone has a plan so they get punched in the mouth. So this reminded me that we need to be thinking about our adversary in the sense of, while they know we have a plan, or at least should have a plan, they are looking at their own plan on how to defeat us. And so that's why it's important to, again, to think of this as a marathon, and you're never quite done preparing yourself, because you always need to be updating as is practical. I liked Aaron's comment one day about what can you control versus what you can't. And obviously you can't control everything about what an attacker is doing to you, but you can certainly control how you respond to that, and it will make your response better in this process. Okay, forgive the drawing. I use this though because I want to get across the point that the tabletop has to have an articulated purpose. In the military, we use the term war game, not because it's a battle sounding term, but it is a long-standing practice. Has been a known skill, or really academic skill, you could argue, for over 200 years now. Plenty of manuals behind it. There isn't such a thing yet in the cybersecurity world. A whole academic background to this, someone with a lot of higher education. Maybe we'll get there one day. But the point here is to really make sure you define that purpose around the tests that you're going to do, to make sure you get the right inputs and the right outputs, or your desired outputs.
Yeah,
Right.
and hey, Aaron, one thing to add in, and this is a flaw that we've seen, or maybe a differentiator. We see a lot of organizations that have done a tabletop within IT. They have a plan that's for IT. But what I've seen through going through real incidents, when the stuff hits the fan of a real cyber attack that's bigger than a bread box, or it's not something that's commodity malware that can be removed, your IT team is at the table, but they are no longer necessarily driving the bus. So when we build plans, we do them at the executive level, including people that would be involved for a large scale attack. Because what I've personally seen, when you don't think that big picture for the advanced attack, is you build a small plan and then it gets thrown out when the CEO wants to be the one running the show. So practice who's going to be in the game is kind of the takeaway from many tough lessons and reactions to those tough lessons through the kind of scoping of these plans.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I have seen, even at enterprise levels, when I have asked to look at their incident response plan, it is not unusual that I'll be given a more help desk oriented plan, and not one that is enterprise level, that integrates the core team, as we like to refer to it, not just IT folks, but HR representation, communications, all those folks that would be responding with you at that level. And so that's a good segue here for these points. So the first step is to scope what that requirement needs to look like, and that's driven by the business. What is the most practical, flexible, reasonable way for you to respond? Another way to think about it is we hear the phrase out of the box thinking. What I want to do when I come into an organization is draw a box around what the problem is, so to speak, or our capabilities, and then go from there. That way we kind of have that drawn out to begin with, so that we don't expand too far from what may be outside of what is reasonable and practical, flexible for us. And then once that's done, then we can identify the team form the team that is going to represent our main response, our core team to it, and then look at who's in our extended team, and then who are a part of our critical vendors that would also be needed to help us respond. And then we deliver a base plan, and then tailor it to the organization. So there's some back and forth on that, and making sure that it is tailored to the organization that will answer the mail for the business. And then there's some training that's involved in that, how to practice, and then and how to practice the plan, and then how does everyone play their roles in that plan. And then it's very important to figure out what are our objectives. It goes back to my point earlier about our tabletop, taking the name of where we're meeting, but really figuring out what do we want to get out of this, and then driving our scenarios based on those objectives. So that, again, it's what's most likely, but then what's also most dangerous, potentially, looking at different impacts to the organization. And then tabletop's conducted after action review to capture what happened and why. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, capturing our lessons learned, and then advancing that within the organization, or instilling, inculcating. This is very critical, because so often organizations will conduct tabletops and then not have a good plan on how to capture all those lessons that they learned from those tests that they did, and then how to move them forward so that they make their plan better and continue that planning that Eisenhower reminded us of. All right.
Cool. So any questions on incident response planning? I know we heard from a couple people that are either working a plan or getting ready for a tabletop. I like the comment of insurance companies are now either forcing or even providing as value add a practice. That's probably as much for them to kind of see how you do as much as it is for you to learn and improve. But any questions for Aaron on incident response or tabletop? All right. So a couple things for your security people on your team. We do host a bi-weekly Friday cybersecurity networking event. We're based in Carmel. We've got some fun, you can see a ping pong table. We've got some fun amenities. We get people together, we talk cyber, non-sales. We don't have any sales reps, as I mentioned earlier, but it's just to help build the community within Indianapolis. We just started this year a monthly newsletter. It's all focused on education and value add. Our second one of the year goes out here in March. And then, yeah, we've grown a lot here in the last couple of years. And I've included email addresses from those that participated today in case you guys have any follow-up questions or need any help on anything. So with that, Jeff, maybe I know we have time left and open to continuing the conversation on cyber or other topics, whatever you think would most be of most value.
Excellent. Thanks so much to Aaron, and Tim. I appreciate that. I'd be interested from the group that, okay, we're 2 weeks in from the major escalation of the actions in Ukraine. Have you been seeing an increase in your organization, an increase in incoming threats?
Hey, Jeff, this is Chris, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen an increase in threats yet, and this was super valuable. So I echo the thank you for sharing all this information. It reinforces some things we're doing in my organization and keeping it board level. We're also creating board level awareness in this space and everything. But I would tell you what's interesting is, just like with the Log4j that was the most recent, and now just the escalation, what I am seeing is more work coming in or information coming in from third parties, either saying, here's our stance on the situation and what we're doing, or we're even sometimes receive requests from our partners that say, hey, we need to know what you're doing because either our internal risk folks or whatever because it is a tangled web of partners and third parties that you're working with, that they're asking us to, so we end up with work that we're not, looking for, that has short turnaround. Hey, what's your response to Log4j? What is your stance for if something happens with Russia and they attack you? So we keep doing our normal day-to-day stuff, and we feel like we're in a pretty good place, but it's this other extra work that's coming from third parties that's been interesting.
Yeah, Chris, that's a great comment, and we have seen the same. We 2 years ago, Tim and I and Aaron West started building a third-party risk service for companies, and we're doing a lot of it in pharma, but now it's even transpired into some of the smaller organizations, both on incoming assessments, like you're talking about, like show us that you're good, as well as the outgoing assessments to third parties that you want to make sure, which third parties are your most critical, like if they were out of commission or they lost your data, which ones are going to be the most impact to your organization. So we've actually, that's been our largest growth focal area. And I've got a strong desire to bring more cyber and tech talent to Indianapolis, the Indianapolis area. So what we've been doing as we've grown that service is that is a great area for talent to be groomed in, because a lot of times you can do an assessment, it's not real time in front of the client, but we can put experts from our team with them to get new resources trained up. So yeah, if anyone needs help in third-party risk management, we are heavily growing in that space. And when I was at Lilly, that was one area owning risk management that I hesitated to staff internally, because it's a lot of effort. The volume is continuous, it's so high, and scaling up and down based upon fluctuations is tough to do with a staff that's dedicated. So you end up with like part-time people and all of that. So anyway, I'd be happy to chat with anybody that has a growing concern there, but we have felt the growth on our end as well.
Hey, Aaron, a question in chat. Can you comment on CISA's free cyber hygiene service? We've got at least one member that's sent a request in there for web app scanning, and still waiting to hear back. Any thoughts on that? Either Aaron, Tim, or Aaron?
That is a good one. I will need to probably take that as a follow-up to dig into that. I know one of our pharma clients is deeply using CISA because they took government funds for pharmaceutical, the project to promote the vaccine development. So they do a lot of the CISA stuff, and I can ask on that one. Tim, have you heard anything on this one?
I mean, it moves with the typical efficiency of most government provided services. So there is a notoriously long waiting list. That said, they do provide pretty good quality services when they get them, but there's a lot of prioritization that goes in behind the scenes. As Aaron mentioned, we have a client that took funds under Project Lightspeed for the vaccine. They get a lot of attention from CISA, probably more than than they'd like. But other organizations are experiencing delays, so that's not uncommon.
I'll own that request. It was me that sent the message to Jeff. So I asked for web app. I submitted a request for web app assessment through CISA on the 25th, and I have sent a second reminder. I just haven't heard back yet. So it's good to know that they're potentially backlogged in that regard.
Yeah, I've heard 20 to 24 weeks is pretty normal turnaround.
Wow.
Okay.
Awesome. Other questions or topics that we have not gotten to yet?
Aaron, would you consider a SOC 2 sufficient to certify a vendor's security practices, or would you be looking for something in addition to a SOC 2?
Good question. So I can now say that we've been on all sides of SOC 2, although, yeah. So when I was in the large corporate, we did rely on SOC 2 type 2 assessments to at least mitigate some of the risk. We've also helped companies, larger companies, build cyber programs to ramp up for SOC 2. We're not a CPA firm, so we don't do SOC 2 audits and things like that, although there's some good local firms here that I would recommend. I think it's unfortunately one of those it depends answers, and I'll tell you exactly why. SOC 2 is type 2, and you definitely want the type 2, which is evidence-based testing, versus the type 1, which is kind of a higher level look at the program and not tested over a duration of time. But it all comes down to the scope of what the management is defining in scope for their service operations. So for example, if you have a company that's a manufacturer that's making parts, and you could SOC 2 type 2 a specific business unit, you could SOC 2. I've seen one company that did their data center. So thinking about like, what are you doing with that company, and what was the scope of their SOC 2? And you can, if they have it, you can request it. A SOC 2 type 3 is one that they can publicly post on their website. It just doesn't have detailed control testing data. But if they have a SOC 2 type 2 and you're reviewing them as a third party and you've got the rights to do that, you can look at that. But I think the answer to the question whether it would suffice or not is, what is the scope of the operations that they defined, and how wide did that go? And I'm a bit skeptical. SOC 2 type 2 is one of the best ways to have something independently attested and audited on, but I've seen far too many games played where they'll SOC 2 type 2 something so minutely small where they've got the certification, they're advertising that they've got it, but when you look at what you're doing with them as a company, it's not really enough of what's in scope to cover your crown jewel assets or operations. So yeah, I think looking at the specific situation, and if it looks pretty comprehensive and by a reputable firm that did the SOC 2 type 2, a lot of times I would say let's turn to another third party that we can assess in deeper lens. Let's at least mitigate some of the risk. But I've seen others that I would say I would not accept that. I would definitely still do a full assessment. And I like the comment from Rick, and compliance is not necessarily security. Couldn't agree further. Compliance is usually 10 years out of date, government required regulations. That's basically the minimum of what you can do. So when we at RevealRisk, and as Tim and I led cyber programs in our corporate world or corporate jobs, risk and risk management should lead your cyber program. Compliance may be a necessary to have, but if you're driving your program through compliance, it's going to be minimum viable product. It's going to be more checkbox. It's usually not going to be scalable and sustainable. So I've seen that lesson so many times and couldn't agree more, Rick.
Other questions?
Tim Maloney here with Shield Sexton. We're kind of a small mid-level firm here, and in-house resources are scarce for supporting a holistic cybersecurity framework. So we're depending on providers like maybe firms like yours or others to help deliver what we need to do. But we're in a construction industry which direct requirements to meet for cybersecurity may not necessarily be there, but guess what? Our risk partners, our financial partners, our clients are all pulling us, pushing us along the way anyways, and best practices, right? And we've all done the tactics that we've already talked about here that done some of the work, but really the developing a holistic approach and the policies that back up the tactics that you're performing has been a challenge. And I know it felt like we'd already done an assessment against the NIST CFS framework just to see where the heck we're at. And of course, like others who have shared, it's I don't really want to share or even look at it again. It kind of made me sick. So lots of gaps to close there. But it's when you bring that back to leadership, the thing is, oh well, we can take a crawl, walk, run approach on this. And I'm saying I need to go from crawling to sprinting, a dead sprint to try to cover some of these gaps because we're already behind the 8 ball on that. So it's one of those, that's what I found to be a big challenge, is just that it is, tactically we've done a pretty good job, but it's just creating the ecosystem around an overall plan that has been a challenge, and that creating the urgency around trying to move forward with investments. There's going to be one-off investments. There's going to be ongoing subscriptions. There's going to be services we have to consume and things of that nature. So it's more of a comment than a question, but I guess I wanted to throw that in there from kind of a mid to smaller firm perspective.
Yeah, Tim, that's a great comment. And we've actually had a number of clients that we started with that had an CSF assessment, and they're in the small to mid-size range. And this is, I don't disparage any competitors, but what I'll say is if you get a NIST CSF assessment and you don't have prioritization, rationalization, and a roadmap that's right sized for your business and business risk, it isn't worth the paper that it's written on. And I've seen, unfortunately, walked into clients that, out of the 109 controls in this CSF, they're 0 out of 5 and red across the board, except for a couple things. And I'm like, but there's no action plan. There's no, and that just creates alarm and overwhelm. And even if you need something like that to get some senior leadership into motion to give you some support, it's not realistic. I mean, even for where I was at prior, hundreds of millions of dollars in budget, and of course a large company, it's a multi-year journey to do all that stuff. So I think it's all about prioritization, linking it to your business risk, starting with what matters most, which is like knowing your crown jewels and the areas of the operations that would be most concerning if lost or if data was stolen. You've got to start somewhere and prioritize the things that are going to make the biggest bang for your buck. And you can always do more later, but it's kind of if you're not thinking in iterations and kind of building a multi-year plan that has a reset almost each year because the landscape changes. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself, but prioritization and focus is key. And kind of connecting the dots back for the small business and the comment earlier, I think it was from Rick Rush. Most small businesses don't have a lot of internal IT support, and they use MSPs. So one thing that we've done is we've actually in the last year, we've stood up a scaled virtual CISO service. So a lot of that covers all the policy work, risk management, mapping your crown jewels, prioritizing a roadmap, helping with special projects, working with that MSP to advance the technical, tactical things. We're not staffing to do tech support for assets, and we're not looking or no plans to have an MSP size of the business. So we partner really well with organizations that they bring some of the security tools to the table. We don't want to compete. We're not a reseller. But we're really more of an advisor and a program builder. So cool. Other questions, comments?
Excellent.
Jeff?
Well, Aaron and Tim and Aaron, thank you so much for jumping on this. I know it was short notice, and I really appreciate you pulling it together for the group. For the group, I am going to post this on our YouTube channel. I'll send the link out to the mailing list when I get that up there so that you can rewatch it, or you can have someone on your team watch it. In addition, Aaron will shoot me the deck, and I'll shoot that out to the group so that you've got the links in there as well that you can follow. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. I know we're virtual. You can't really hear applause, but I'll do it myself, and you can hear one man's applause, but really appreciate it.
Yeah, sounds good. And I'll send out that white paper again. Would love your feedback on the relationship dynamics with the CXO. I call it the chief whatever officer, CIO and CISO. I feel like that's a barrier for a lot of organizations, and it's a passion of mine to help leaders on both sides of that equation to navigate to get to better outcomes through minimizing that misalignment. So I'll shoot that over as well.
Excellent, excellent. All right, thanks a lot. Happy Wednesday to everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.